This oil tycoon, who was the 74th richest man in the world, died, and his heirs will inherit almost all of his $9 billion because of a one-year moratorium on the estate tax. If he had died next year, 55% of that money would have gone to the federal government. Only the federal government could give people an incentive to die sooner. Taking a hard look at the death tax, our freedom fighters this week, my Fox colleagues Elizabeth McDonald and Charlie Gasparino, Reason TV's Nick Gillespie, and political scientist Carolyn Heldman. Elizabeth, are they reaching out to the grave in order to take money from the wallets of dead people?
Yeah, and by the way, is there going to be, you never see a lockbox for this supposed revenue that's raised. By the way, being a student of the IRS, having testified for a Congress about the IRS and tax reform, I can tell you that half of the promised tax revenues that Bill Clinton said would come from his tax hikes in the early 90s did not come through. And instead, the cut in the capital gains tax and the death tax more than made up for that difference. And look, you hear Bill Gates and Warren Buffett supporting the death tax. They get to shelter their gains in all sorts of tax shelters, and also they get a lot of their income in capital gains, which is taxed at the lower rate.
Carolyn, why should the government be able to take 55% of what I want to leave to my children?
Well, this was initially put in place because of the growing gap between rich and poor as a result of the Industrial Revolution.
Meaning the government should redistribute wealth?
Yes, exactly. There was a concern that if this growing gap between rich and poor got so large that really only wealthy people would have a say in government. This is something put into place by Andrew Carnegie. FDR fought for this, and it makes sense now more than ever because that wage gap has actually doubled since 1980. And poor people and middle-class people have very little voice in government. So this action to redistribute wealth, as you put it, is something that's very important for democracy. And
Nick Gillespie, that's a lot of baloney that poor people and middle-class people have no say in government.
Well, actually, what I was going to say is that there's no connection between taking 55% off the top of a billionaire. It's not going to help me. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help actually poor and powerless people in this country. And on top of that, it's immoral because all of this money has already been taxed multiple times. Enough is enough at a certain point. And the question is, a huge part of America and a huge part of moving upwards is being able to leave an inheritance to your kids, whether you make 20 grand a year or 200 grand a year. What we should be doing is figuring out ways to take Social Security, which is supposed to be a retirement plan, and allow that to be extended to the next generation.
Charlie Gasparino,
25, 30,000.
At some point, you and I have talked about this many times, at some point it's taxation theft.
It is. I'm still getting over the fact that poor people, middle-class people don't have any say in this country. Coming from a working class.
I didn't say any. I said little say.
Little say. Well,
they also don't pay a lot in taxes.
They have the same vote I had, and they voted for Barack Obama in multiple ways. And guess what? Barack Obama right now is redistributing wealth. And guess what? The economy is in the shape it's in right now because small businesses are worried about that redistribution. They are worried about being taxed at much higher rates. They are worried about the entitlements that are coming. And I'll tell you this, you want to stop poor people and working class people from working? Tax businesses like that.